Chapter 13, Vive. Che's continuing influence in Latin America. In Latin America, Che is as politically important today as he was when he died in Bolivia over 4 decades ago. In some ways, he is even more important now. In recent years, there has been a dramatic shift to the left in the politics of most Latin American countries. This shift in the political orientation of this important region of the world has given rise to renewed interest in Che Guevara's ideals of Pan-American unity, anti-imperialism, and humanist socialism. This rather remarkable change of direction in the region's politics is largely in response to the failure of the neoliberal agenda of free market and free trade capitalism pursued by the U.S. government, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and most of the governments of the region since the 1980s. The neoliberal economic and social policies promoted by these Washington-based institutions, often referred to as the Washington Consensus, have widened the gap between the rich and the poor, while they have denationalized the economies and privatized the governments of most of the countries in the region. The tidal wave of popular opposition to these neoliberal policies and to the adverse effects of the accompanying globalization of these societies, i.e., the denationalization of 206 CheGuevara their economies so that they can be more effectively integrated into the expanding global capitalist system, has generated new political movements and new populist leaders who openly identify with Che Guevara's ideals and his revolutionary struggle. Che and contemporary Bolivian politics. There is no better example of Che's influence than Bolivia. After suffering for decades under U.S.-backed right-wing governments, which imposed neoliberal policies that adversely affected the majority of the population, the country's largely indigenous population has risen up in opposition and found its political voice. The political mobilization of the poor majority of the country led to the election in the fall of 2005 of Bolivia's leftist President Juan Evo Morales, who won the election with some 54% of the votes. Popularly known as Evo, he is of indigenous descent, Aymara, and is the leader of the Movimiento al Socialismo, MAS, or Movement Toward Socialism. As previously mentioned in Chapter 11, Antonio Perito, the oldest brother of Coco, Inti, and Chato Perito, and Loyola Guzman, who was a member of the Urban Support Network for Che's guerrilla force in Bolivia, are prominent members of MAS, as are many other leftist intellectuals, workers, and peasants in Bolivia. Morales is the first person from Bolivia's indigenous majority to lead the country since the Spanish conquest subjugated the indigenous population 500 years ago. He and the other leaders of MAS are outspoken admirers of Che Guevara. They have placed photos of Che in the Nacional Parliament building, and a portrait of Che made from local coca leaves in the presidential office, CES. The MAS-led government has initiated a constitutional revision of the country's governmental system, an agrarian reform program, and nationalization of the country's mining and natural gas industries. Thus, the Morales government is reversing the direction of Bolivia's economic, social, and political development. Instead of privatization of public services and denationalization of the economy, the country's new leadership is committed to regaining national control over the country's mining and natural gas industries, and using the revenues from these industries to finance a people-centered, Vive 207, equitable, and environmentally sustainable program of social and economic development. Before his official inauguration as President of Bolivia, on January 22, 2006, Morales went to the archaeological site and spiritual center of Tiwanaku, the capital of one of the most ancient cultures in the world, where he was crowned the honorary supreme leader of the Aymara and was given gifts from representatives of indigenous peoples from all over the Americas. In the speech that he gave at the La Puerta del Sol, or the Door of the Sun, which is the gateway into the ancient temple of Calisasea, Morales said that the struggle that Che Guevara left uncompleted, we shall complete. Granma, January 23, 2006. Afterward, in the speech he gave at his inauguration, he included Che among the fallen heroes in the 500-year struggle of his people for their freedom. Even more significant is that Morales went to La Higuera, where Che was killed, to celebrate Che's 78th birthday on June 14, 2006. He is the first Bolivian head of state to have ever visited the village, and he chose this date to pay tribute to Che, to officially open the medical center the government of Cuba donated to the village, and to congratulate the local graduates of the literacy program Yes, I Can, which has been advised and equipped by the Cuban government. Che's son, Camilo Guevara, was present, as well as the Cuban ambassador to Bolivia and a number of Cuban doctors in their white coats. Morales pledged Bolivia's solidarity with Cuba and Venezuela and said he would be willing to take up arms to defend them if they are attacked by the United States. Delacker 2006. Hugo Moldes, a journalist who is the coordinator of the political front of some 30 different popular organizations that support Morales's government, told the press that the medical clinic and the literacy program demonstrated the relevance of Che's revolutionary struggle, since one of the reasons he gave his life fighting in Bolivia was to ensure that the Bolivian people had access to adequate health care and education. Mayoral and Gonzalez 2006. Accompanied by Bolivian government officials and the Cuban ambassador, President Morales also went to inaugurate the installation of modern medical equipment at the Villagrán Hospital, the same hospital where Che was last seen before his body was secretly buried near the airstrip in Villagrán. Today, the laundry building where Che's body was laid out for examination, and where the last photos were taken of 208 CheGuevara him, has become a shrine in his memory. Morales's visit to La Higuera and Villagrán as the Bolivian head of state is the first time that any high government official in Bolivia has paid tribute to Che Guevara and his guerrilla mission in Bolivia. Moldes, who has close ties to Cuba, told the press that Morales's tribute to Che was consistent with the path of Morales's own struggle, and with the identification of his government with the ideals of Che. Che and contemporary politics in Venezuela and Ecuador, Che's ideas about the need to create new human beings guided by socialist morality, and his critique of bureaucratism have found particular resonance in Venezuela today. Moncton 2007. The regime of Hugo Chavez has widely distributed copies of the critical essay Che wrote on bureaucratism while he was a minister in the Cuban government. But even though Chavez has pointed to Cuba as an important source of inspiration, he has emphasized that Venezuela will have to create its own form of socialism to fight its particular history and conditions. The emphasis on direct democracy in Venezuela is consistent with this perspective. Che Guevara statue in La Higuera, the site of his death in Bolivia. Canijero, Vive, 209, and Chavez contends that the only way to overcome poverty is to give power to the poor. Thus, he and his supporters contend that the Bolivarian revolution will create a democratic, humanist socialism, rather than the bureaucratic, authoritarian style of so-called socialism that existed in the Soviet Union. It is in this context that Che's revolutionary legacy has found the most fertile soil in Venezuela and Bolivia today. His writings, his deeds in the Cuban Revolution, and his personal sacrifice in the struggle for human liberation and social justice are a source of great inspiration and guidance to the Venezuelans and the Bolivians who are struggling for these same ideals today. In Ecuador, Che is also held in high esteem. Much like Chavez and Morales, the country's new leftist president Rafael Correa Delgado laced his acceptance speech on January 15, 2007, with references to Simón Bolívar and Che Guevara. He said his country needs to build a 21st century socialism to overcome the poverty, inequality, and political instability that have plagued the Ecuadorian people. Both Chavez and Morales were special guests at Correa's inauguration. With them at his side, Correa said, "Latin America isn't living an era of changes. Rather, it's living a change of eras, and the long night of neoliberalism is coming to an end." Fertile 2007. Che would have been happy, indeed, to hear what Correa said afterward. He said, "A sovereign, dignified, just and socialist Latin America is beginning to rise." Exactly the kind of language Che used 4 decades earlier. Che's contemporary popularity outside Latin America. Critical observers of Che's contemporary popularity in North America, Europe, and other regions outside Latin America are quick to point out that his iconic image has become a global brand, often devoid of any ideological or political significance when it is used to market certain products. They dismiss his continuing appeal to youth as merely a case of adolescent revolutionary romanticism and radical chic. O'Hagan 2004. However, while it is true Che's image has become quite profitable and is used to market a wide variety of goods to young people in the United States and elsewhere, his image still has political significance. Consequently, his image was removed from a CD carrying case recently in the United States, after it sparked significant criticism in the media. 210 CheGuevara, in which Che was compared with Osama bin Laden and Adolf Hitler, Ray's 2006. Target Corporation, the large retail company that distributed the product in question, felt compelled to withdraw it from sale and issue a public apology for selling the item. This incident is proof that Che's supposedly apolitical iconic image still has too much political significance for many shoppers in the global capitalist shopping mall. Moreover, even in the United States, the center of global capitalism, Che still finds political admirers. When asked several years ago why his father is perceived as a devil by American corporations and believers in the free market, Che's son Camilo accurately pointed out that he is a devil for the U.S. government and American multinationals, but that many North Americans admire and respect Che, and they find GHT injustice in American society under his banner. Humo, 1998. Thus, one sees Che Guevara images along the U.S. Mexico border as manifestations of activism. Although Che Guevara was not Mexican, his image has been appropriated by activists in the Mexican community within the United States who seek more access to education and civil rights, and the use of his image can be seen as a critique of current U.S. immigration policy. Camilo also correctly noted that there are people in the United Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez at Che Guevara House Museum, 2006. AP Images. Che Vive, 211 states who declare their solidarity with Cuba and seek to lift the U.S. economic blockade against his country. Prominent public intellectuals such as Regis Debray in France, Jorge Castaneda in Mexico, Alvaro Vargas Llosa in Peru, son of the famous novelist Mario Vargas Llosa, Pacho O'Donnell in Argentina, and others have done their best to demystify and dismiss the significance of the enduring popularity of Che, particularly among young people. One of the most representative members of this group of critics is the British-born liberal savant Christopher Hitchens, who supported the Cuban Revolution in the 1960s, but has since called himself a recovering Marxist. In a 1997 review article of John Lee Anderson's Biography of Che and Che's, posthumously published The Motorcycle Diaries, Hitchens argued that Che's enduring popularity is a contemporary case of classic romantic idolatry. In what has become a familiar argument among intellectuals in the United States and Europe for dismissing Che's iconic popularity, Hitchens asserts that Che's iconic status was assured because he failed. His story was one of defeat and isolation, and that's why it is so seductive. Had he lived, the myth of Che would have long since died. Hitchens, 1997. Thus, Hitchens and other intellectuals who share his perspective claim Che belongs more to the romantic tradition than the revolutionary one. Since, to endure as a romantic icon, one must not just die young but die hopelessly, and according to Hitchens, Che fulfills both criteria. However, there is a fundamental factual inaccuracy and a false premise in this thesis. Che did not die young. Someone who dies at 39 is hardly young, except to those over 50. His death was untimely to be sure, but he was not young when he died. Furthermore, Hitchens and the other intellectual demystifiers of Che's iconic popularity fail to comprehend the continuing political and ideological significance of his iconic legacy. The waving banners, the graffiti on the walls, the posters, the t-shirts, the videos, the LMS, the books, the pamphlets, the photos, the songs, the tattoos, and the cries of Che Vive on the lips of people around the world provide overwhelming evidence that Che Guevara represents a powerful symbol of one of the most outstanding examples in modern history of resistance to injustice, inequality, exploitation, and political domination. And this is true for people literally around the world. Che continues to be a popular hero for many people, of all ages, for the 212 CheGuevara, same reason that Bolivia's President Evo Morales, in his late 40s, says he admires Che. I admire Che because he fought for equality and for justice. And he did not just care for ordinary people, he made their struggle his own. Reef 2005. As art historian Tricia Ziff has astutely noted, Che's iconic image mysteriously reappears whenever there's a conflict over injustice, and there isn't anything else in history that serves in this way. Lots 2006. More than anything else, as Ziff acknowledges, Che is a symbol of opposition to imperialism, and in the end, you cannot take this meaning out of the image. Ziff is correct in asserting that the meaning of Che's image is that of the guerrillero heroico, the heroic guerrilla stir against imperialism, and particularly U.S. imperialism. Che's influence on contemporary Latin American politics, but in contemporary Latin America, Che is more than a powerful symbol of resistance to U.S. imperialism. His values and many of his ideas continue to be extremely relevant to the current political reality and the shift to the left in Latin American politics. His views and revolutionary life are finding increasing resonance among the new political leaders, new political movements, and rank-and-file political activists in the region. They find Che's vision of a socialist future, and his ideas about how to get there to be directly relevant to their efforts to end the region's tragic pathology of distorted, neocolonial, and unequal development. Che's ideals and vision of a united, free, and socialist Latin America are a source of inspiration for their pursuit of emancipatory, equitable, and sustainable alternatives to the disempowering, inequitable, and unsustainable structures and values of 21st century global capitalism. Che is much more than a popular symbol of uncompromising defiance to injustice and imperial domination. His revolutionary vision of the future and ideas about how to wage the struggle to get there are relevant to the contemporary efforts being made to bring about a revolutionary transformation of the basic economic, political, and social structures in Latin America and the Caribbean. As a sign of how times have changed in the region, a little more than a month after President Evo Morales paid a historic tribute to Vive 213, Vara in La Higuera and Vallegrande, a similar unprecedented event took place in nearby Argentina. It will most likely become a legend of its own, following an important meeting in Cordoba, Argentina, of the Mercosur Southern Common Market, to which Cuba was invited and Venezuela was accepted as a new member. Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro made a historic pilgrimage to Alta Gracia to tour Che's boyhood home, Adán Mundo. 2006. Since 2001, the middle-class house, now called Villa Nidia, where Che lived as a boy, has served as a museum dedicated to his memory. On July 22, 2006, almost 4 decades after Che's death, 2 of the most important heads of state in Latin America paid a highly publicized visit to Che's boyhood home. When they arrived, the waiting crowd of several thousand people responded with a chorus of chants. Fidel, Fidel, Hugo, Hugo, and Si Saint. Guevara está present, one feels it, one feels it. Guevara is present, Ray 2006. As they emerged from their vehicles, the 2 heads of state waved to the crowd and stopped at the entrance to the house in front of a bronze statue of Che, modeled after a photograph taken when he was 8 years old. They admired the statue and then went inside for an emotional encounter with the memorabilia of Che's boyhood and family life. Castro was surprised to learn that Che's parents rented the house, and he asked how much rent they had paid, Adán Mundo. 2006. When the director of the museum said she really didn't know, Castro jokingly reproached her for not knowing this important fact. At one point, Castro broke down and cried in front of a large picture of Che's mother Celia with her young children around her, including the young Che. Then, Castro and Chavez met with some of Che's childhood friends who were waiting in the house, including Calica Furrer, who accompanied Che on his trip to Bolivia and Peru in 1953. Castro and Chavez viewed Che's birth certificate, handwritten letters, and a motorbike like the one he rode around Argentina. Ariel Vidoza, a childhood friend of Che, answered some of Castro's questions about Che's childhood. Among the answers she gave, she said, Ernesto didn't like the rich much. He preferred to play with us, the poor ones. Ray 2006. As they left the house, they posed for photographs with Che's boyhood friends in front of the statue of the young Ernesto. To the reporters waiting outside, Chavez said with a great deal of emotion in his voice, I-214, CheGuevara came to feed my soul. I am leaving with the batteries of my soul charged for 80 more years of revolutionary struggle and battles. Venezolana de Televisión 2006. With tears in his eyes, Castro told the reporters and the crowd that he was sorry he and Chavez could not stay longer and waved to the onlookers, who were clapping and cheering. No one could possibly have imagined such an event 40 years ago, even 10 years ago. It was a historic scene. Che's comrade in arms, the famous 20th century revolutionary leader Fidel Castro, 80 years old at the time, and Hugo Chavez, one of Latin America's new 21st century revolutionary leaders, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of Che's boyhood home, which is now a museum of the revolutionary life of the legendary Che Guevara. There they stood in Alta Gracia, High Grace, Argentina, surrounded by a cheering crowd of thousands in Che's homeland, where not too many years earlier a bloody military dictatorship had ruthlessly disappeared anyone thought to be sympathizers of Guevara and Castro. As the caravan of cars carrying Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez left Alta Gracia for Cordoba, they passed a building in Che's hometown, where Laundry Building in Vallegrande, Bolivia, 2006, where Che's body was exhibited in October 1967. Rafael Rodriguez, Che Vive, 215, someone had written on the wall in bold red letters. Che Vive, Che Lives. There are similar Che Vive slogans on the walls of the Laundry Building in Vallegrande, Bolivia, where Che's half-nude body was displayed after he was killed over 40 years ago, O'Hagan 2004. With the visit of Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez to Che's boyhood home in Alta Gracia, Ecuadorian President Correa's televised comments, and the Che Vive slogans on walls in many parts of Latin America, and the World Refel Act is what his wife, Aleida March, wrote in her foreword to Che's Congo diary, Guevara March, and got 2000 L. Men do not die when their life and example can serve as a guide to others, and when those others succeed in continuing their work.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe,